Okay, comrades, I think we'll kick off because Andy, we gave a commitment to that this would be a quick in and quick contribution, maybe one or two questions, and then on to the next race, is it?
Yeah.
So, well, I won't read the whole CV out, otherwise the whole time would be taken up with it, but it is impressive when we look at Andy's record, both in government and in opposition, that he covers Home Office, health, culture, media, education. And maybe that's not all of it. But to me, I have a fondness for the year 2015, which was a sensitive year for some people. But that's the year when he was going to speak to a general meeting in Belfast, and there was suddenly an announcement by a gentleman called Corbyn that he was actually going to fight the election, and that changed everything, and the whole climate changed. But it changed things for us as well, because we ended up with some 2,000 members in Northern Ireland and a very, very substantial amount of support for Jeremy Corbyn. That to some extent has evaporated, and we'll be down to 900 members, but that's not the reason entirely as to why our membership has gone down. The fact that we don't have the right to stand is critical in terms of you cannot build a party in Northern Ireland that isn't registered with the Electoral Commission, cannot fight any elections, hasn't the credibility of having a leader that puts himself to the electorate. And I'm afraid the last time when Keir was over, a journalist put it to him, why should people in Northern Ireland listen to you whenever you don't put forward any candidates? And I'm pretty sure I saw him gulping and wondering what's the answer to that question. But as he left, he said he was a unionist and would be fighting for the union, which we found extremely odd at the very last minute to make an announcement like that on his way out. So we look forward to finding out what the shape of this union is. And we hear rumours of the House of Lords being reformed so it will represent the three devolved nations of Northern Ireland. I don't know where that's taking us. But one thing, the question I would pose to Andy in terms of exactly why his commitment is there, is it because it's against natural justice that we're in the position we find ourselves in Northern Ireland, or is there more to it? So I'd leave it over to you, Andy, to see what your own views are on why we don't have the right to stand in Northern Ireland.
Thanks, Steve. Shall I stand for that? Can everybody? Oh, people coming who can't see me on the Zoom.
Yeah, if you sit.
Hi, everybody on the Zoom.
If you sit, Zoom will do the work for you.
Your chair is strategically placed.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Oh, okay. That is just, it's more helpful in this room.
There we go.
Move the laptop.
The right to stand. I've got the right to stand. Very good. To start, I'm going to start with a strange sort of place, really. But there's a song by Billy Bragg. Does anyone know Billy Bragg?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. All right. Yeah. Well, this hopefully is not controversial. It's a song called Northern Industrial Town. I don't know if any of you know this song, but can I recommend?
Sing it.
I could sing it. There's karaoke at the Mirror Party later. I could warm up now, but I won't be so bold. But it's the song, the lyrics say, it's just a northern industrial town. The front doors of the houses open into the streets. There's no room for a front garden, just 2 up, 2 down. It's a northern industrial town. And it kind of goes through the song like this. And it gets to the end and it says, it's not Leeds or Liverpool, Manchester, Belfast, Manchester, Sheffield or Newcastle. It's Belfast. It's just a northern industrial town. And it's kind of had a big impact on me, that song, when I first heard it, because it came out around the time of the Good Friday Agreement. And I think what it was getting after was this separateness that we've got between each other, and particularly the way we here think about Northern Ireland. It shouldn't be how we see it, is it? It is just a northern industrial town. It is like Liverpool. It is the same as Manchester.
Well, some of us don't think so.
No?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Because we believe in Ireland.
Okay,
Whole
okay.
Ireland.
Okay, no, I take your point. I take your point. But from my point of view, I'm just talking about not so much, you know, necessarily an allegiance, but more just how people are, how people live, the culture, the humour. Do you know what I mean? It's the same, isn't it? And it's very similar. And yet we don't kind of think of it that way. So Steve Rotherham and I went to Ireland recently. We did the first joint mayoral visit overseas to Dublin, where the green carpet was rolled out for us. And I think it was rolled out because obviously the northwest of England has a very different relationship with Ireland than Westminster has with Ireland. And I think very deliberately they wanted to send that message that, you know, there is a kind of relationship here that's based on kind of quite long-standing ties of friendship and family. Certainly in my case, my family came from, I'll get this wrong now, someone's going to correct me again in the room here. I'm going to say Drogheda. Have I got that right? My ancestors came from there to here, to this city. And I think, you know, we're very conscious, and it's true of Manchester too, you know, the Irish ties, north and south, are really deep. So we went to Dublin and we met the Labour Lord Mayor of Dublin. I think she's out of office now, but Alison at the time. But then we went north to Belfast and we had a 4-city meeting with the Lord Mayor of Belfast as well. I think it was an alliance, Kate, lovely person. Yeah, really, really wonderful person. Anyway, the point being that the 4 cities were sitting around a table and we were talking to each other. And I think that is the point I'm getting to here, is that the commonality that we've got is much more than anything that's I don't think there is much difference at all, actually, between us. And I do think that, I mean, I'll come back to my point, and you know, it's fair that you challenge me, but I come back to my point that getting city to city collaboration going is a good way of just getting people to people relationships going and pulling these islands a little bit closer together and making people understand perspectives more. But also, I think it is about sort of saying that let's have a sort of a common approach when it comes to politics. And this is where I'm going to come to the theme of tonight, the right to stand. Because, you know, if you take the premise, not everyone does, that it's just a northern industrial town. I think the fact that if Labour could stand candidates across the north, I think it would kind of bring a commonality to the political discussion and the political dialogue, particularly around a general election, rather than it feeling like there's a separateness there that we're kind of not entitled to, you know, and then it pushes away. And I think in some ways that's what the SNP want. They want to push us out of their conversation that goes on. And we can't, I don't think we can let that happen, because, you know, if you allow that separateness to sort of kind of become established, then we're not going to be the collaborative group of cities, nations, regions that we need to be going forward. You know, we are the same city, in my view, similar cities separated by this thing called the Irish Sea, but the Irish Sea could be our greatest resource going forward, couldn't it, when it comes to green energy and the jobs that can come from that. And I just think if the party had the right to stand in Northern Ireland, I think we would start to talk a more common language of politics and the struggles of ordinary people and how we can resolve those struggles and work together across the Irish Sea. And I just think that would be a good thing to open up. And I know that the issue has always been for the party, the sister party relationship with the SDLP. Now, I know that's been the kind of the sticking point. But as I understand it, Boyd, you correct me if I'm wrong, there's been a sort of a move there, and that there's an agreement that now, I think, isn't there, or a kind of tentative agreement like the one that Labour has with the Cooperative Party?
No, I don't think that's in place as yet.
Okay, but that could be part of it.
Would, I think, be something like that would be part of any deal. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not here to. I'm not up to date with all the nuances, as you can tell, but I'm here to support the principle, and the principle is that I personally feel that we shouldn't be restricting people's choice at an election time. You should be allowing people to express their democratic preference without too much constraint. I would always say that, you know, a plethora of party standing, and that's the way things are increasingly here. You know, huge number of parties, new parties standing at elections, independent parties. You know, I think I just would want to see it, and I know that the NEC is being asked to look at this again, and I would just hope that you know that they will, and that we you know, we'll get a positive result for you. And I'll finish on the point that kind of is the theme really I'm on, about this collaboration between people that often, because of politics or the national political debate, are pushed apart. The thing I will never forget from my political life, if you like, and my career, and I'll never forget this, you know, if I live to be 100, is the kind of time when I took Margaret Aspinall, Jenny Hicks, and the Hillsborough families to Derry to meet the Bloody Sunday families ahead of our Truth Day here on Hillsborough, because I was in touch with people in Northern Ireland at the time, saying, well, what could we learn? And we went out to Derry, and we sat in a community centre there, and we discussed. I mean, it was one of the most humbling things I'd ever seen, when the two sets of families just started to talk to each other. And honestly, the learning they gave us was utterly invaluable, actually, really invaluable, when it comes to what we need to prepare for the day when the Hillsborough Independent Panel report came out. And what I reflected on really was just how easy it would have been for that meeting not to have happened. And it was luck, actually, that it was an SDLP MP at the time, Mark Durkin, who fixed up the meeting for us. And that was something that I just think is etched in my mind, because the struggles of those people were the same as the struggles of people here. And I think what's maybe not understood at times is, you know, and I don't think this is understood in Scotland and Wales at times. Cities in the north of England feel exactly the same about the establishment down there as people do in Northern Ireland, as people do in Scotland, as people do in Wales. But because we're in England, everyone thinks we're somehow bought into a sort of a, you know, different position. We're not. You know, the way the country works, the authorities have denied truth and justice to communities across all parts of this collection of nations and regions that is the United Kingdom. And it's as true for people here. You know, this city where you are now, you're tuning in on Zoom, this city was crying injustice for 20 years. 20 years, and nobody was listening. Now, that's true of parts of Northern Ireland as well, isn't it? You know exactly what I'm saying when I'm saying that. But it happened here. And people might forget really that it happened, but it did happen here. So actually the struggle of ordinary people here is the same as the struggle of ordinary people elsewhere. We have a country here that hasn't been sort of set up for cities like Liverpool or Manchester. You might remember in the pandemic the way they treated us when they tried to railroad us into tier 3 without giving us the support. That's how they treat us, as well as they treat you, and as well as they've treated Scotland over the years. And my kind of feeling is we've got to start uniting more. If Labour started to have a presence in Northern Ireland with candidates we could talk to, you know, we I think would start to unite and build a case for change in this country that would be in the interest of people in all corners of it. And for me, to have the leader of the Labour Party open his speech here today in Liverpool with a commitment to that Hillsborough law, I honestly can't tell you what that meant to me, and I know it will have meant to the families. You know, that is a kind of sign that we're going to have a Labour government that is going to level up the scales of justice and change the way this country works. Because a Hillsborough law means that public servants, British public servants, would be required by law to tell the truth at the first time of asking. Now, you imagine what it would have meant to Northern Ireland if a law of that kind had been in place many years ago. And obviously we know what that would have meant for the Hillsborough families here. And that's where we've got common cause. And it's time for us to identify where we have common cause, ordinary people here in the north of Ireland, and then we start to work together on that basis. And I hope that case can be understood by the NEC. I think it brings a sort of a sense of, as I say, common politics to all places. It unites working people in all places who should be united and pulling together, rather than, you know, feeling that they've got sort of there's a separateness there. and that's why I support it. And I just will forever, as you know, boy. In 2015, we've had a reminder of it. Maybe it was a different election, but in 2010, you backed a young candidate called Andy Burnham, didn't you? When I stood in that election, I remember getting that nomination from the Labour Party in Northern Ireland. I can't tell you all what it meant to me to have that, given my own connections with the area, and I will always treasure that support that you gave me, and it's why I'm here tonight. It's why I do support this call that you're making, and let's hope as we move forward from here that it gets heard and it gets granted, and we have Labour representatives that we can work with in Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, Andy.
I'm gonna have to shoot off to the next thing. I'm sorry to say.
No problem.
Okay.
That's great.
All good. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Bye to everyone on Zoom.
Thank you.
So it's an interesting point that Andy made there about the fact that we were able to support him as a candidate. We were also able to support Emily Thornbury, who had a Belfast connection. Her father was from Belfast, and a very distinguished human rights lawyer from Belfast, Cedric Thornbury. We were able to support her in elections. And that proposal came about result probably of Pauline Hart's interest in Emily Thornbury's case, and the fact that she wasn't getting the support that she should have been getting in order to run in the election. And Pauline's our next speaker. I think she may have had some contribution to this biography herself, in as much as she confesses to have come in on the Corbyn rush. I wouldn't like to say that to someone that they came in on the Corbyn rush, but I suspect that she actually may have acknowledged that she came in on the Corbyn rush, and she doesn't want to be in politics in Northern Ireland. It's talking about how many Protestants we have and how many Catholics we have. And remember, the latest statistics show us we are 3 minorities in Northern Ireland. We're not 2 major parties and the others. We are 3 minorities. And when George has here, and I think he was in some ways the midwife of the Good Friday Agreement, he'll have to take into account, can the Good Friday Agreement accommodate a situation in which we've got 3 minorities? And the largest growing minority is those of people of no religion, and they've doubled from 10% back in 2011 to in the recent census, they have jumped to some 20%. So taken together with the growth of the centre politics in Northern Ireland, there are things happening. And into that field, Pauline dares to tread. So over to you, Pauline.
Okay. Will I stand? I'll sit because Brigitte has moved and she's on camera duty at the moment, so I'll move out of camera if I stand. I'd just like to say how refreshing. I've never heard Andy Burnham speak before, but at this stage, usually in conference, I feel very tired. But at this precise moment in time, I'm feeling very enthused by what he said. It was a breath of fresh air, because usually our politicians who we bring to our fringes beat around the bush because they don't really want to say we support your right to stand candidates. So I think that was really good. And I do think he's right. I do think he's right about building relationships, sustaining those relationships, and also about entering into partnership and collaborations. That has to be the future for the Labour Party in Northern Ireland. Tonight I've been asked to speak about our Right to Stand working group. So I will do that. A couple of years ago, the EC decided that we should try and get a group together of people who would be able to come together, and I suppose in the same way Andy has just enthused me, to enthuse people around our right to stand. So we tried to get members, and that was very difficult, but there were 5 of us. Jared Gallagher, Connor Connor Becky. Becky, am I saying that right? I can never pronounce your name, Connor. Sorry. Boyd Black, myself, and then there were a few people, Dougal McCullough, and people who came in and out of that group. And for such a small group, we feel we made some very big achievements. We set up our Right to Stand website. That was mainly down to Jared and Connor, and a lot of late nights were spent on that. Jared worked a lot on making contacts with CLPs, and mainly, so if we do have any contacts of CLPs in Scotland or Wales, we'd love to hear from you. And then we went out via Zoom and spoke with CLPs, giving them information and helping them with bringing motions forward so that their CLP would register to support our Right to Stand. And so that's worked really well as well. We still need more, there are many more CLPs we need to make contact with. And again, if that's something you're interested in talking about, you can talk to myself, or Margot can take your name on our sheet of paper, and we'll make that happen. And I suppose one of the biggest things was that Jared Gallagher put himself forward in an election for the NEC. For the first time, a member of the Northern Ireland, or the Labour Party in Northern Ireland, stood to be a member of the NEC, and that had never happened before. So he did well for a first time standing, and hopefully he's going to stand again, and we'll make many more contacts and get many more votes. And we feel that if we had a voice in the NEC, that would help tremendously. And then finally, the group was responsible for contacting or organising a poll. So Lucid Poll or Lucid Talk is one of the main pollsters in Northern Ireland, and Jared and Connor got stuff together, went to them and asked questions in relation to the document that you all have in your chair, which is our submission to the NEC. One of the questions related to the evidence that we had, if we stood candidates, how was that going to be received? Would we get votes? And Jared, who is fantastic at analysing data, worked with Lucid Poll, and in fact, we feel if we stood candidates now in council elections in Northern Ireland, that we would, through proportional representation, because we already have that for council elections in Northern Ireland, that we would stand a good chance of getting people on a Labour ticket into local councils. And from there, who knows? So,
Thank you. Do you want to move on?
I think we can, yeah.
Unless anybody has any questions or anything they want to say about Andy or...
Yeah, we'll not rush onto another speaker, make it more proactive. And can I be clear, if you're opposed to everything we stand for, you're welcome to speak. It's not one of those sessions where you're going to be shouted down if you disagree with the theme of the meeting. So feel free. Anybody, any questions they'd like to put, or anybody wish to make a comment, if they give us an introduction, who they are, and
a lot of hands up from the lady over here.
Well,
Here you are, asking this lady here her hand.
We'll go to the corner here first.
My name is Mohammed Asad. I'm from Brighton.
Okay.
CLP, also deputy chair for LGC committee Brighton and Hove. I come here to support Peter Kyle. I saw him in a conference, so I thought it would be good to mingle together with all of you to give support from Brighton.
Thank you very much. And then
this lady here.
Yeah, I'm Kay Morrison, originally from Northern Ireland. I'm well and truly Northern Irish. And to be totally honest, I didn't realise until some years ago that we actually had Labour Party members in Northern Ireland. That just shows you how ignorant I am. I was a councillor in Fife, which is north of Edinburgh at the time, and we were organising a by-election, Westminster by-election. And then I realised that amongst the campaigners were people from Northern Ireland. So I asked questions and was told, yeah, we have about 400 members. That was at that time in Northern Ireland. So I was a bit puzzled by that. Well, puzzled by my own ignorance, actually. However, after that, at a Labour Party conference, I bumped into Dougal, who was on screen a little while ago. And he told me that the number had increased and that really we should be doing something about enabling Labour Party members in Northern Ireland to stand candidate, to give Labour Party members in Northern Ireland the same rights as Labour Party members elsewhere. So that sort of raised my level of awareness. I am now in Essex. I'm in Harlow in Essex. I'm a councillor there. That was, I can tell you, a hard fight, but managed to do it. And I took a motion, I mentioned this to a couple of you earlier, to my CLP, my current CLP, Harlow CLP in Essex, explained the background. And although a couple of people were a little concerned, and it's because they don't necessarily know a great deal about the situation in Northern Ireland, I think it would be accurate to describe their stance as nervous. One person actually said, but how do we know that these Labour Party members in Northern Ireland are not really going to be pushing the idea of independence, republicanism, etc.? My response, I don't know how you feel about this, my response was, how do we know that Labour Party members in Wales, in Scotland or anywhere else aren't actually following and pushing the agenda of independence, etc.? So I think that stopped that line of thought. The motion went through. No, just one person who abstained and this other one who was kind of against. Everybody else said, yes, of course, because we talked about Labour Party receiving, I'm assuming, members pay subscriptions in Northern Ireland. They pay, you all pay. We do the Labour Party members accepting your money. You could say it's nearly a form of fraud. You could, if you wanted to be a bit ungenerous, because Labour Party members in Northern Ireland do not have the same rights as Labour Party members everywhere else in the United Kingdom. So I've been trying to do my bit, even though I'm now quite far away from Northern Ireland. And if there's anything at all that you think I could do in future, just say the word.
Thank you very much. Just to further correct the point that you made, of course, is that in Northern Ireland, a very strong centre party has the same position as ourselves. You're free to have a long-term aspiration of a United Ireland or promote the union, and it has not in any way harmed the body politic of Northern Ireland, that a very strong centre party gives that freedom to its members. And if we had the right to stand and the right to be represented, our members would be free to adopt whichever constitutional view long term they want to. So we'll move around again. Yes.
Even more shocking than your story was when I'm not from the Northern Ireland, from Dublin, but I was interested in the Labour Party. It must be 10 years before, and I was in contact with them online, and they kept telling me we're not standing. You know, we don't have people there. And so I met a member of the Labour Party, Peter. Through her, I knew that it existed, but the party centrally wouldn't tell me. They just said no, there isn't one.
That was a bit
But
shocking.
this went on for 10 years. And I said, it was just accidentally that I met somebody who was a member. And I realized, my God, it's here. And they never told me.
Well, forever.
They wanted me to join. I have no idea how they got my email. And I said, yeah, I will join when you allow us to negotiate here or to organize here.
So
they never told me.
thank you. Before we'll move to you in a minute, but Pauline could address your point about Peter Kyle, perhaps, because
I'm wondering whether you will come here or not.
no, we'll explain that. She'll explain to you. Yes.
Peter couldn't make it tonight, so instead first thing on Sunday morning, the delegation, so there are four of us in the delegation, met with him, and we had a very frank discussion. We shared with him the results of the listed poll, which is in the little booklet that's on your seats, and we had a really good discussion, a really robust discussion with him. So yeah, and we feel very positive about that he took the time to meet with us. He couldn't make it here tonight because it was a clash. So
Thank you.
And we've also met with him formally through the British Irish Labour and Cooperative Council, which met in Belfast, and he was our guest at the City Hall in Belfast, and we've established a very close contact with him, and we have a very high regard for him. There's just behind you first, and then we'll take you next. Yeah. No, we're here. This is the order I said I was taking it in.
So my name's Oscar. I'm from Newcastle. Unfortunately, I'm going to need to be like Andy and Dash after I've spoken. But I just wanted to share briefly a couple of things with you. The first is that obviously I'm Jewish, and you know, we are neither Catholic nor Protestant. There are not many Jewish people in Northern Ireland, but they are in the other category. There are people of no faith as well as people of other faiths who are not part of the Catholic or Protestant community. And it's always been, you know, crucial to my Labour values that we are not a religiously segregated party, that we represent people from any religion. And it seems to me to be completely invidious that we're buying into this notion of a sectarian politics instead of what we say in the rest of the United Kingdom, which is that we are anti-sectarian, right? We're not neutral. We are against sectarianism. We think that people should work across communities. In our city, we have a very large population, particularly for Northern Ireland. We have a lot of Northern Irish students, a huge number of Northern Irish students. And the ward I live in Jesmond, we have an enormous number. And I canvass them, and you know, we ask for their votes in our elections in Newcastle, but yet we can't ask for them to vote when they go home. So we can say we believe in anti-sectarianism, but that it stops at the border of the Irish Sea. And to me, that just seems to be fundamentally wrong. And that it should be for you to decide what you do, but that our values should start with anti-sectarianism, but that they should also include that, you know, the idea that people can make their own decisions, and that you as the Northern Irish Party should be allowed to make a decision for yourselves. And yeah, I will certainly be going back to my branch and to my CLP and moving a motion to support your campaign.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed the talk.
Thank you very much.
Be supporting you.
So
Over here.
no, we're taking this order, and then we're taking it here.
Yeah, I'm David Branston from Middlesbrough. I actually did a session on Northern Ireland for the Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland Party. And many years ago, I wrote an article in the Premium Review about Northern Ireland, which has always interested me. I know why the problem has arisen, because a lot of people in the Labour Party believe in a united Ireland and don't believe that any other solution is correct. I think that it is unfair to look at it that way, because clearly there are people who have very different views. And I think what a lot of my colleagues rather like is it's a sleeping dog. They don't want to deal with it. Whereas really what's happening is you're not getting the opportunity for the representation you need. And to me, it's always seemed quite wrong. And so I certainly will be going back to the branch and saying that Labour should have the right to stand in Northern Ireland. I think probably it would be best to have a deal with the SDLP, that in those areas which are predominantly Republican, that maybe they stand, the areas that are not, you stand. But certainly there is a situation here where people aren't being represented, and from working class areas in many areas of Northern Ireland, all we're getting are people who ally with the Conservative Party, and that's ridiculous. So I don't know whether that's, you know, that's a confused answer, but it reflects, I think, some of the uncertainties that we have within the Labour Party, certainly where I am. But I think certainly we need to change the present situation. I was quite shocked to find that there was a Labour Party branch in the first place, and that you actually support us financially and yet don't have the chance to put candidates up. Seems to be quite wrong. So I will go back and I will put that motion to.
Yes, and in Northern Ireland, the fee of the Labour Party is probably one of the highest fees of any political party in Northern Ireland. So we're paying the same fee as members in the rest of the UK, and it's a very considerable contribution that people are making. Not only do they subscribe the same amount of money, but they also take part in the fundraising, and they generally support Labour causes and so on. So on the question of the SDLP, we do have members of our party who are also members of the SDLP, but it's only a handful probably. You know, I would be able to name the ones who are actually members. They reject the idea that they can't be a member of both, and they do. So we'll your contribution.
My name is Eamon O'Tierney. I am a member of the Labour Party in Islington South, which is Emily Thornbury's constituency. And I'm also was on the committee of the Labour Party Irish Society until 2 years ago, but originally I'm from Warren Point in South Down. And what I want to say is that, I mean, I have came across the membership in the North a few years ago, got in touch with them through the Labour Party Irish Society and other affiliated societies. And Boyd came across to Liverpool to a meeting that was organised here to talk about the issue about where to stand. And I think it's only a neat airing, and I have great sympathy for the fact that people not understand. But there seems to be a lot of confusion about the reasons that the party have that decision. And I've heard, and I'm still not sure what the reasons are, but I've heard lots of people describe the relationship of the Labour Party with the SDLP, and completely erroneously. So we should be able to get down to the bottom of it, because I've had people who are senior members of the Labour Party in London completely misrepresent what the relationship is between the SDLP and the British Labour Party. However, what I wanted to say is that I've heard Peter Kyle speak 4 times in the last 2 days, and he was at pains to say that there's a lot of things about representation in the North that aren't happening as we talk about structures too much. And I didn't have a chance to raise with him an issue that one of your young members brought to the Labour Party Irish Society a couple of years ago about the increasing male suicide rate in the North. So that at the moment, I am trying to raise this issue on behalf of the Wales Lounge with the First Move Hague, and then also with Regina Irish Camp. And I hope we will raise it with but I think you should have representation. We will have representation. There are ways to maintain these and build things on campaigning things like the suicide rate in the North of Ireland.
Thank you very much. So maybe if we move on to another speaker and then come back again, gives you something more to go on. So you're only in the room, George, but you're on next. Let me introduce you first. Okay. So I think I earlier on described you as possibly the midwife to the Good Friday Agreement. That would be stretching it a bit, but it would be. But certainly the Good Friday Agreement never envisaged, I think, that, or the designers of it never envisaged that we'd have a situation which would be 3 minorities in Northern Ireland, and we're so used to the notion that there'd be Protestant Catholic parties and maybe another party, but the idea that in the census it would come out that the fastest growing opinion in Northern Ireland was the opinion that from 2011, where 10% of people completing the census form said that they really had no religion, to now saying nearly 20% are saying that. And also the growth of the centre itself demonstrated in the last election. And the fact that we could still be held to ransom by either of the 2 major parties, the Republican Party or the DUP, that the Good Friday Agreement may well have to be amended somewhere down the line, but maybe that's too soon to throw you in on that one. But anyway, I'll let you have your say on your position on.
Thanks very much.
You came for. Okay.
First of all, apologies. Luke and myself have just been to the annual general meeting of the National Executive Committee, which mercifully didn't last very long, considering we used to have 12, 13-hour meetings in the recent past, which is ridiculous. It was all over in about 25 minutes. So apologies. I'll perhaps start where you just left off. It seems to me that if you look at the trends in Northern Ireland, if you look at the annual polling, attitude polling that takes place, what's happening is that people are deciding quite decisively in some cases, still not a majority, but they don't want to be involved in sectarian politics. And the biggest growing section of the population are those who don't necessarily describe themselves as Irish or British, but those who describe themselves as Northern Irish. And I think that's a hopeful sign. And I'll say why it's hopeful for our cause in a moment. But if you delve deeper into that polling evidence, and I know polling doesn't tell you everything, but other things are emerging. For example, the growth of people who, if you ask them, would they be willing to work in a religiously segregated workplace? No. Where would they want their children to be educated in a sectarian education system? A growing number of them, it's no. A growing number of people would have no objection if their son or daughter decided to marry someone from a different faith. And that is a change that's been taking place progressively since the Good Friday Agreement. At the moment, the main beneficiary of that, and somebody may have said this earlier, is the Alliance Party. And we've seen them, and that is a natural place for anybody who takes those attitudes, a natural place for them, given the choices available to them, to place their vote on the ballot. But amongst those people, and this is where it gets really to our advantage, are people who actually would like to be able to vote Labour, not SDLP, because there are reasons why a significant number of people wouldn't quite go that far because they don't consider themselves to be nationalists. So I think, yes, to be fair to them, and I'm no advocate of the Alliance Party, but they are mopping up that vote that is there to be taken by a party that would represent working people, would represent the values of working people, whether they're Protestant or Catholic, in a way that no other party could do that. So I just want to, and I'll finish on this point because I don't want to take up too much time. I don't know if any of you managed to get into the conference today and heard Keir's speech. Keir made the point that we want to speak as a party for all the people of this country. The implication of that is the people of Northern Ireland, if they want the opportunity to vote for a party that speaks for the whole of the United Kingdom, should have the opportunity to vote Labour. Now, I don't want to over-egg the pudding. I know everybody in this room knows that at the next general election or the next assembly elections, we are not going to take significant numbers of seats. But there are places where we could put the case, where we could put the Labour case, and where we could make significant progress, and even in one or two places, possibly even win a seat. So why shouldn't the people of Northern Ireland have the opportunity to vote Labour? I can't think of a single credible reason why they shouldn't, but I think the tide is moving in our direction. And I just hope that Keir, on reflection on the point he made today about representing all the people of this country, will recognise that one step in that direction would be to allow the Labour Party to field candidates in elections in Northern Ireland. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can take a couple of questions now, and then we'll go to Luke after that. So,
Okay, just before you do that, our comrades on Zoom can't hear you because the microphone is on this table. So if anybody has a question, can I ask you to come up just so they can, because until now
closer
they've
to the
only heard
microphone, yeah.
every third word. So if you can, and also I'm not sure if anybody on Zoom has any questions, you might want to ask that question too.
Yeah. We'll bring the Zoom ones in later.
My name's Dermot Arthur. I'm a member of the Northern Ireland Labour Party. I think you said you spoke with Peter Kyle on Friday or Saturday morning. It would be helpful to know what was actually said, what he said, how he sees it going forward, because I spoke to him and I wasn't impressed. I also spoke to Emily Thornbury. I wasn't impressed. It's like an empty vessel. No substance, muted. So it's a bit disappointing when you mention that people that you helped in the past, unlike Andy Burnham, who's always supported the stand. So to ask any relevant questions, I would like to know how the discussion went.
Okay, we'll park that one for a minute. It's a very, very good point. Question here or comment?
Can you come up? Yeah,
Yeah.
just so.
If you would.
Yes, my name is Jean-Pierre Palmer. I'm a ordinary member of Orpington CLP in Greater London. This is obviously a long-term project, and we don't have the benefit at Westminster, but because we have STV at Stormont, we really need to acknowledge that the problems that exist of crowding out one person's vote or not doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So if we can stand candidates at the Assembly when it finally
And
gets
local
us
government coming up
and
next.
local government, we can prove that Labour is popular in Northern Ireland, then eventually you could start to have seats that we can win at Westminster. But of course, this is like I said, it's a long-term project. Yes. If we put that case forward, and also if we acknowledge the fact that the Labour floor is now supporting proportional representation, we might even be able to get it round the other way instead. Yeah. So it was just a case of if we should highlight more the differing electoral systems and how that works in Labour's favour.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wants to speak? They're going to come up to the front. Remember,
And Tony.
Maggie and Tony there want to come up to the front here.
It was just more of a question. I'm Cameron McKinnon. I was at first in CLP, which was one of the ones that actually passed the motion, which I was quite happy with. I'm now at Rotherham. But it was just a question, sort of, what do you guys feel is needed to get this passed so that people, Labour Party members, can stand? Do you need to get the unions on board? Do we need to lobby the NEC more? Do we need to speak to more MPs? Or is it just a case of we need more funding? Question, or all of them, yeah. It was a question to the panel really as to what do we need to do to go forward.
Well, we'll deal with that one, but we'd be able to say we've got 3 out of the 4 major unions, but the 4th one is a problematical one. Okay.
Yep. When someone says on this platform and this evening, sorry, Luke, just having my back. The situation is that you said it was a long-term project. I started this fight in 1979, so it has already been a very long fight, projected fight. It really has. And all of us are getting bloody fed up because I went to speak in Northern Ireland in 87, was it 87 or 6? I was fighting Norman Tevitt at the time as a parliamentary candidate. And I was told, if I go, you will never get a seat to fight. That's what I was told by an officer of the party. So I put up 2 fingers to them and said, I'm going because I believe it. I believe because I'm a social democrat, and the social democrat has a right to stand where they're being governed from. And you, Northern Ireland, are being governed from Westminster. So therefore, it's not just the local elections, but it's the other elections. I mean, I used to ask and say to the party, why don't you stand candidates in the European elections? That would have made sense to me. You've got, but what's never made sense to me is that the SDLP actually brought down a Labour government in the House of Commons in the 70s. So I don't have any love for the SDLP under those circumstances. And I would never be, if I lived in Northern Ireland, support them for that reason. But the situation is that what we've got to do is like lose George and lose Luke on the NEC to actually make sure that other people are listening to us. The MPs will talk to you, yes, but let's face it, Peter Kyle is curtailed in many ways because he's a member of the cabinet. So he has to, before he opens his gob on policy or anything else, he's actually got to be able to have the cabinet backing on that before he does that. I understand that and I appreciate it, but still, that there are still other aspects where we can use Peter, and that is actually inside the cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. After Tony, then we'll go to Luke.
I'm Tony McMullen. I'm the chair of the Cooperative Party in Northern Ireland and a member of its NEC. And the Cooperative Party does support the right of the Labour Party to stand candidates. And if they do, we want to run Labour and co-op candidates in Northern Ireland. From my point of view, this is actually very, very basic. Because the Labour Party, if it supports anything, it supports equality and doesn't allow people to be treated as second-class citizens. And yet the people of Northern Ireland are treated like second-class citizens by the Labour Party. The Labour Party members in Northern Ireland are treated as second-class citizens. The Labour Party are extremely generous to them, extremely generous. They allow them to vote for 6 varieties of unionism, 3 varieties of nationalism, 3 varieties of republicanism, 2 varieties of communism, the Green Party, the Alliance Party. There are 3 variations of Trotskyism in Northern Ireland that we can vote for. Indeed, the Labour Party are so kind that we can vote for 22 different political parties, except for the one that we're paying our membership to. And that's the fundamental point for me. It's completely erroneous and completely discriminatory for the Labour Party, and it's dishonest for the Labour Party to allow the members in Northern Ireland to be paying, as was mentioned earlier on, exactly the same membership fee, and they get nothing back from it. And I mean, although the Labour Party membership is now about 900 and was at one stage 3,000, but what is to attract people to join the Labour Party? People do not join political parties to be in a debating society. They join it to win power, to influence power, as was demonstrated the whole week at this conference. What's the purpose of the Labour Party other than to win power and make society better for its citizens? The people in Northern Ireland are not entitled to that, are not allowed to do that. And it really is fundamental to me. It is so basic. And I appeal to George and to Luke and to the other members of the NEC to look at the question. And I mean, some of us are a bit old in the truth, but it's the young people in Northern Ireland who are looking for radical, decent social democratic policies, and they're getting nothing back. And is it any wonder young people in Northern Ireland leave Northern Ireland and come to England or Scotland or Wales or elsewhere because they don't want to be involved in the dreadful sectarian baggage that is politics in Northern Ireland? We need better, and we need it now.
After Luke, we'll check if there's anybody online who wants to come in, but Luke, if we could call on you now. I think the one thing that Luke brings with him above all else is how to get the vote together. So if we're ever allowed to, rephrase that. When we're allowed to stand in Northern Ireland, right? Be positive. It's that objective there, and we're going to take it. Then we have to waken up and say, how can we bring out the vote? Because there are some very skilled vote getters in Northern Ireland, and they've been able to resort to all kinds of tactics to get their vote out. And it is still a relatively high percentage of vote that comes out, but there's still more votes to be brought out. And I think Labour could be a contributor towards increasing that participation in democracy in Northern Ireland? Look,
I wonder whether that was a slight allusion to the fact that I have, unlike most people in the Labour Party, I've got some experience of standing in and organising for elections held under single transferable vote. In my case, inside the party, and kind of got my head around the tactics of at least inside a political party, how you win one of those. But just to explain a bit, I sit on the George is a PLP rep. I'm a CLP rep, and the CLP reps represent the entire United Kingdom, so including the Northern Ireland CLP, or part of my constituency of people that I represent. If you're a member of the Northern Ireland CLP, just as much as someone is if they're from the Tunbridge Wells CLP or the Manchester Withington or the Glasgow Southside CLPs, that is one of the small number of areas where electing us and being represented by us that you have got equal political rights. I also, before I kind of get into everything, I also sort of full disclosure, because sometimes people look at my slightly Celtic colouring and think that I may have some family connection to the island of Ireland. Sometimes I think I'm the only person in the British Labour Party, sorry, the UK Labour Party in the England bit of it, who hasn't got a family connection to the island of Ireland, either north nor south or either community. So I have no kind of dog in any fights, and I'm also an atheist, so I don't fit into any religious traditions that might be connected to different sides or different communities. I kind of actually feel a great deal of interest and empathy with both narratives in Northern Ireland. There are times when I read about either narrative, and there are elements to it that I find appealing and interesting and feel empathy towards. Maybe that makes me completely confused, but it makes me an interested student of what I think is a fascinating part of the world, a part of the world that has an awful lot to offer now that it's moving from a period of conflict. It's a place with a hell of a lot to contribute to the United Kingdom and to the island of Ireland, and everyone that lives on both islands. So I think the fundamental issue here is actually one of civil rights. So it's like, I do not understand why it's not considered to be kind of discriminatory for a UK political party not to allow kind of full rights of citizenship, including running as candidates for that party and being able to vote for that party, to all the places that are part of the United Kingdom. So that doesn't mean, that's not a unionist argument. You could be in favour of Northern Ireland not being part of the United Kingdom, but while it is, people in Belfast or anywhere in those 6 counties ought to have the same political and civil rights as someone from Kent or from Oxfordshire, and denying them that strikes me as discriminatory. And it's also just fundamentally unfair. On a personal level, I I've met Boyd and other colleagues coming over to these conferences pleading for their right to politically participate, and constantly hitting a brick wall and being denied something that they really want, that they desire, that is part of their political identity and their belief. Why is the Labour Party presenting this brick wall to people that are asking to engage more in it, that are asking to fly the flag of the Labour Party in elections and campaign for the Labour Party in elections and vote for the Labour Party in elections? That seems to be fundamentally actually quite a churlish reaction to turn around to people that wish to participate more, and tell them that they can't. And I have to say, the people that I've met from the Northern Ireland CLP appear to me to have very deeply thought through democratic socialist values. You don't sign up and pay the 50 quid a year or whatever to a political party casually if that political party then doesn't give you half of the benefits of, or more than half of the benefits of membership that it applies to everyone else. That requires a degree of commitment to keep fighting to ask for that representation. It implies thinking very deeply about what it means to be a Labour person, what it means to have a connection to the trade union and labour and cooperative movements, what it means to have democratic socialist and social democratic values, and why they might not fit into any of the other political offerings that are there. I also have to say, from my encounters with people from Northern Ireland CLP, that it is cross-communal. I've met people who consider themselves to be from a unionist background, but their Labour and socialist politics trumps that and is more important to them. I've met people from a nationalist or Republican background, but whose Labour or socialist or trade union politics trumps that identity and is the primary political identity that they want to express. And I've met people that fit into that kind of category, that growing category that all the polling is talking about in the middle, that refuse to be defined by either of those two camps or communities and want a, I don't know what you would want to call it, a secular or at least a non-sectarian political identity. And I think all of those are valid places to come from on this. I think the party lacks courage in dealing with this issue and lacks intellectual consistency of like why allow the argument on membership and then deny the purpose of membership, which, as previous speakers have said, is to try to get into power at every level in politics and to implement Labour politics, policies. That doesn't make sense to me. And I think it's because they look at the complexities of the history and the politics and the different communities in Northern Ireland. They kind of run scared of getting dragged into it. Well, there's kind of a moral responsibility to get dragged into it on some level if the United Kingdom as a whole is the current political entity that Northern Ireland is part of. And that's like, again, I'd reiterate, that's not prejudging any decisions that the people of Northern Ireland might ever take in the future about wanting to be in some kind of different political arrangement, but they are where they are now. So if you're a UK party, you've got to address the concerns and appeal to people in every part of the UK. And I think the practical obstacles aren't quite as rigid as they used to be. So for a start off, there's the issue about the electoral systems below the Westminster level. That I know, Maggie is one of my oldest friends in politics and is not as much a fan of single transferable vote as or of proportional electoral systems as I am, but I hope would recognise that in the particular circumstances in Northern Ireland, the electoral systems outside of Westminster elections were deliberately designed to give representation to every strand of opinion and proportionality. So you wouldn't get, like, I don't know, a unionist clean sweep in a part of Antrim or a nationalist or Republican clean sweep in an area on Border or in West Belfast or whatever. The concept is that everyone gets some voice in their local council and in the assembly, and there's absolutely nothing in terms of the electoral system to stop one of those voices that's there being how many parties you say, 22, being a 23rd party, which is primary purpose is social democracy and democratic socialism, and which doesn't take sides on what you could call the national question. They can be represented. It doesn't take votes away from the SDLP or anyone else that we might have any kind of affinity with, because either you would get enough votes to get one of the 6 seats in a assembly seat, or you would get knocked out and your votes would transfer to whoever your second, third, fourth preferences were, and they would still count. And then we have like the relationship with the SDLP. I absolutely don't have any animus towards the SDLP. So I've got really good friends who have held high office in the SDLP, have been assembly members or whatever, who are old friends dating back 30 years. And I think some of the tradition of and the contribution to civil rights in Northern Ireland and to the peace process in Northern Ireland, the SDLP made, means that they deserve respect, but they're not the party for everyone. There are people that wouldn't want to be in it because of some of their policy stances, or wouldn't want to be in it because of the way that they identify, and then they have slightly moved themselves away from the socialist family in terms of the European family of socialist parties. They're technically in it, but the arrangement that they're now in with Fianna Fáil is very disconcerting. I don't think people in the UK Labour Party have particularly clocked it outside the Northern Ireland CLP. People in the Irish Labour Party in the Republic have certainly clocked it and feel very affronted by it, and that it's a kind of rejection of the whole family thing. So that there's no kind of particular moral reason. Oh, it's another party that is absolutely our only possible sister party. It is a sister party, but it is veering off in some strange directions. There's also nothing to stop multiple member parties of the Party of European Socialists standing in proportional elections. The PES has always had two or more member parties from some European countries, because they've got proportional systems and there are different currents within socialism that have run alongside each other. So none of that is an excessive obstacle. I have to say, getting the party, I'm close to the leadership of the Labour Party. I'm close to the people that run the machinery of the Labour Party, but they don't seem to want to listen to me yet on this. They think it's a quirky thing that I believe in, and George and I were met with a kind of, oh, we couldn't put you on the committee that goes and investigate, because there's a commitment to reinvestigate the right to stand during each parliament, and we got a kind of nudge that we were perhaps too partisan in terms of favouring people's right to stand and to campaign for Labour, and wouldn't be allowed to engage in that process. I think the Northern Ireland CLP is a smart bunch of people that are navigating and trying to move forward in a hugely complex political environment, and actually already, even though you're not allowed to stand, you build relationships with other political forces, you talk to people, you understand that you're in a pluralistic and complex political environment where there's never going to be like a dominant party. And I think some of the work that you're doing about engaging with the Irish Labour Party, because they've got members in a northern branch as well, and about looking for community of interest there, and could there be a concept of joint membership or something? I think that might be the way to get through this Gordian knot or unlock this complex key, because I think that would remove some of the fears that the party leadership has. I mean, their basic fear is that if they start allowing candidates to be stood in Northern Ireland, they'll somehow be dragged into taking sides, despite all the commitments that are constantly made by the CLP that you wouldn't take sides on the constitutional issues, that you've got members from both sides of that, they also worry that it sends a signal that a future Labour government wouldn't be even-handed in kind of even-handed arbitrator in stuff around the peace process. I don't think that's really. I think the political parties that are linked to communities in Northern Ireland are more mature than to think that. The Sinn Féin and the SDLP, or either of the big unionist parties, they're not going to suddenly turn around and think that the British Labour Party is abandoning decades and decades of even-handedness in the peace process just because it allows people to run in an election and to deliver some leaflets candidates and to become a councillor or an assembly member or whatever. They're not actually, yeah, it's not going to freak them out like that. So I think there's lots and lots of unnecessary fears that need to be overcome, and you will get there in the end. But I appreciate this is taking far too long, and it's and it is fundamentally unfair on people who are very, very loyal to the Labour cause, that are giving up their time and their money because they believe in Labour politics, and all they're asking is to contribute to it. And I think that is a fundamental unfairness, that actually the people at the top of the party, I don't think it's malice towards you, or like they're deliberately being unfair, but it's a crime of kind of negligence or running away from a problem, and they ought to be a little bit ashamed of themselves actually about the way that they've treated you. And this is like a very public commitment, because I don't know who, yeah, it could be being filmed as well as being on Zoom, but it's a commitment I have repeatedly made every time I've stood for the NEC, and I've stood win and lose a number of times. Still haven't managed to get the wins quite up as far as the loses, but at least I'm on a streak of ticks rather than crosses at the moment. But every time I have made the commitment that I support the Northern Ireland CLP's right to run candidates, and I think if you were allowed that fundamental civil right, you would actually start to be making a fantastic contribution, bigger contribution even than you do now, to Labour, and you would be making a fantastic contribution to civil society and political life in Northern Ireland. There are people in this room, on the call, active in the CLP, who would make brilliant councillors or assembly members, or maybe even an MP out there, and we're not getting to use your talents because of this bloody-mindedness or obstructiveness about moving this forward. Sorry, I spoke for rather longer than I intended to, but I hope that was.
No, it's very welcome.
Address a couple of the questions. And I'll be brief. The first thing is, and Luke covered it, but I just want to emphasise it. The SDLP, they vote, their MPs vote in the House of Commons most of the time with the Parliamentary Labour Party. Some of their values are very, very similar to our own. But the truth is, they are a nationalist party, and there's a section of the community who might not be rabidly unionist, but they're certainly not going to vote for a nationalist party.
But also, sorry, they're a Catholic party.
Pardon?
They wouldn't say so, but they're really a Catholic party too.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I once spent, by which time he was in the House of Lords, when I was a Northern Ireland Office Minister, an afternoon with Jerry Fitt. Had lunch with him at the start of it, and those who remember Jerry will realise what I'm saying when I say lunch didn't seem to involve any food. Jerry, and I'm not entirely sure this is an accurate description of how the SDLP came about, but some people in the room will know this. The start of it was a political party based around the docks in Belfast called Dock Labour. And it was an attempt, according to Jerry, to get a non-sectarian party off the ground that would be eventually absorbed into the Labour Party. And he says what happened is that people like John Hume and Seamus Mallon then took it over. It became the SDLP, and it became a nationalist party. Now, there's probably a grain of truth in all of that, but you know, after probably the better part of a bottle of gin, I wouldn't vouch for the veracity of what he said. But the second point I wanted to make was the question about who do we need to get on board, which was asked earlier. I think first and most importantly is to expand the support we've got in the trade union movement. Unison should be the first target. Now, I've talked to Unison, senior people in Unison about it, and they say their problem is it's not one of principle. It's the fact that their members, or at least the way their members are organised in Northern Ireland, are opposed to it. So the first thing, and I intend, and I'm sure Luke will join me, to continue that dialogue with Unison, because they could be the very recruit we need to get this over the line. And the second thing is the socialist societies. You know, we've heard from the Co-op Party, which is a different entity. But I think the socialist societies, the sort of arguments that Luke has put in, and I'm sure others have put earlier, would land very well with the socialist societies. And they've got a representative on the NEC. And if their representative on the NEC could be persuaded that this is the right way forward, that would be important as well. And then the other thing, I'm delighted that there's 3 members of Knowsley, which is our CLP here tonight. And there's a growing number of CLPs who are supportive, and we need to mobilise them. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. I'll talk to Louise, who's our CLP secretary, about later how we can reach out to other CLPs. But the more CLPs we can get in Scotland, Wales and England on board, then that builds up the pressure. And I just want to finish on an optimistic note. When I spoke at this event last year, I thought sincerely that it's the right thing to do, but I didn't think we were making progress. I actually feel 1 year later that we are making, it might not feel like that at times, and I know it's frustrating, but I think the opportunities, as I said earlier, are opening up to explain in really strong terms why this is not only right for those in Northern Ireland, whether they're in the Labour Party or potential voters for it, it's actually the right thing for the Labour Party.
Right thing to do.
Take another point from the floor here first. Is there someone online?
There's no. They're getting anxious.
You need to speak from up here.
Thank you. Sorry that I seem to be jumping.
If you stand to one side and speak towards the mic,
Right,
there.
like this, is
Yeah,
this
will
the
do,
best way to
yeah.
speak?
Yeah.
Right, Ben Cousin, former secretary of the campaign for Labour representation in Northern Ireland from 1978. I'd like to look at what limited understanding I have of some of the background of the background. A huge and complex situation. I think the situation is even more huge and complex than what Luke was referring to, the brick wall which advocates of this democratic cause have been bumping into, and cowardice, negligence, and similar sort of psychological explanations have been brought forward. But I think the problem has historically, it may no longer quite so much be the case, lies further behind and higher up the causal chains. Am I interrupting anything, or
No,
is it the other way round?
Just ignore it, yeah.
I will do so. A brief comment, but it leads towards the geopolitics of the Hillsborough law, which, had it applied to Bloody Sunday, might raise the awkward issue of should those duties of telling the truth perhaps at last, not necessarily in the first instance, apply to those British Army officers who compiled the relevant reports, which certainly have been refuted by Saville in his fairly comprehensive review, but which sundry sources, which hope perhaps to stand to Saville as Saville did to Widgery, suggest that there was quite a pack of lies in the reports about and from within the paras there. Just a little bit of cultural stuff. I think the Liverpool situation, that is where we are, is quite important and interesting. The modern Conservative Party with mass membership seem a bit pathetic now in terms of their election of leaders. Mass working class conservatism started here in Liverpool with Alderman Salvage, with the Protestant Working Men's Association. Liverpool is a sort of northeastward extension of Ireland. In 1918, as you move from Cork and Kerry northeastwards through Belfast, you find the old Irish Parliamentary Party held up quite strongly in the 6 counties, where in the 26 counties it was actually pretty well abolished. How you go further north and further east, you will find that in Liverpool, the Irish Parliamentary Labour Party retained MP. Can't remember which constituency, I think it was called Tape O'Connor, was he not? Until 1929. And the Protestant Party and its oppo, the Catholic Centre Party under Father Downey, also stood as an obstacles to working class unity in this very city where we're sitting now. I think that this cultural commonality, which has been referred to already, is even fuller than platform speakers have mentioned, and I think that should give us some little bit of hope. But back to why the cowardice, why the negligence. It was the time of Neil Kinnock's leadership, and Neil Kinnock had a very, very formative and terrible experience in Washington when Reagan completely and utterly snubbed him. George Shultz rubbed his nose in the dirt, and frankly, the dependence of the British state on the American state, which started in 1940-41 and was cemented with Suez in 1956-7, informs the senior officials of the British state. The senior officials of the British state inform cabinets and shadow cabinets, often by what they don't say as well as what they do say. The ground rules are there. Now, is that changing? Who knows? It might change if people remember the venom with which Tory ministers and secretaries of state attacked Joe Biden on the most pathetic sectarian grounds, saying the President of the United States, the most influential and powerful man in the entire world, is worried about the Brexit rubbishing of the protocols, because he's got an Irish background. The Tories were losing their grip, and I don't think they're re-establishing it. And actually, that suggests that this brick wall of the unity of big capitalist states, big NATO states, may be less of an obstacle that senior British officials, permanent secretaries and such like, may no longer feel that allowing the settlements in and around Northern Ireland might be disturbed. I leave you therefore with a quote from Winston Churchill when he was a vigorous advocate of home rule in the interests of the British Empire, which of course always came first for Winston Churchill. He supported home rule on the basis of a quotation in Exodus. He said, Pharaoh said, they will go away, but they will not go very far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one, the legal question has been raised, so we need to just get it out of the road for the moment. We wouldn't be here at all but for legal action. The Labour Party was forced into conceding the right of members in Northern Ireland to come into existence, if you like. That we were out there, we couldn't join. I was elected under a single transferable vote system to Belfast City Council in 1973 and went on to become chairman of the Education Committee there, and then left to go into housing. So there was always Labour people over there in Northern Ireland who wanted to be in the British Labour Party but couldn't get into it. So that was decided by legal action. And then it was determined in an out-of-court settlement that this peculiar arrangement, that the NEC would set up a review body that would look at, in every new parliament, at the right to stand in Northern Ireland. That's where it has come from. Now, is it illegal for them to keep on saying, no, you can't have the right to stand? Unfortunately, we cannot find, now that law on discrimination and so on has been modified, that there's a clear and straightforward case. We've been to council's opinion on it and so on. But there's one very important point, and that is that natural justice does prevail at the end of the day. And we have asked that this review process is open and transparent. And that, in a sense, is what the last speaker's been talking about. If people aren't prepared to tell the truth openly about what has taken place, and there is no natural justice, that we have not been able to see what was said against us and answer that, then natural justice has not been observed. And it may be that there will be some resource to legal action over our rights not being regarded in terms of natural justice. Now, anybody who knows about law knows that natural justice is probably one of the hobby horses of the legal profession, and not necessarily one that you can ride to a successful conclusion. And we don't want to go down that road. We want to win the case openly by argument and debate. And surely we have demonstrated, in answer to all the questions, adequate answers, that Lucid is a perfectly respectable polling organisation that has not been proved to be wrong on anything to date in Northern Ireland. It is heavily relied upon, and it has said there is 6% support out there in terms of a first preference vote, and there's possibly a 30% potential in various other transfers and so on. That is sufficient to build a labour movement in Northern Ireland. If you think about it, the SDLP is down to 7%. So what's the argument about us not being allowed to stand on 6%? So I'm going to leave it there as far as the legal question is concerned. We have a couple of people who'd like to come in on the Zoom, if you would just bear with us until we try that. Ken Adams would like a contribution. Let's see if it works, Ken. No sound.
Unmute.
No sound.
Okay, guys, can you hear me?
We got you now.
Yeah. Okay, got now. I shan't be very long because I don't think speakers should speak very long, considering that we've all got something else to do. I want to bring up this unison thing, where apparently we've been told that the unison don't back it because their members don't back it. And what I find that really, really hard, because the evidence is, way back when I was a trade unionist and fighting for this, the postal workers had a ballot, and about 80% of them voted that the Labour Party should stand in Northern Ireland. The engineers, the AEU, the engineering union had a through their democratic process, and they had a ballot, and they had much the same result. So, and then we have the survey in Northern Ireland that was done recently. I forget the name of it, which said that you talked about the 6%, but a survey proved in general that there was a movement in favour of organising in Northern Ireland. So how come out of all of the unions, Unison have got members that are totally different from all the rest of the people in Northern Ireland? It doesn't add up. What I think adds up, if it's really true that Unison National Executive would vote for it if only their members would, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some hard-headed people from different political parties or persuasions that are actually kicking up a fuss and stopping it. And it's not actually the view of the members that's getting through.
We'll leave it at
I'm
that.
pretty sure. Yeah, that's it. I'm pretty sure.
That's it. Thanks very much, Ken.
Right, cheers.
Chris Wilson, could you have a quick, crisp contribution from Chris?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the speakers for a really, really good meeting, and how great to hear some informed commentary for a change. I have a question to our two NEC speakers, if I may. It's abundantly clear to anyone who lives in Northern Ireland, there are not 3 camps in Northern Ireland. There are not 2 camps, I beg your pardon. There are 3 camps in Northern Ireland. There's growing centre ground. There's a growing rejection of tribal politics. There's a new generation growing up. There's support for things like integrated education and all of that stuff. And it's trying to find a political voice. At the moment, it's seeking to find a political voice mainly through the Alliance Party, sister party to the Liberal Democrats, which continues to increase its representation on this side of the Irish Sea. So my question to our two NEC members, both of whom I thought made fantastic contributions, is why isn't that change being spotted by their NEC colleagues? Why do other NEC, Labour NEC members still talk as if politics here is stuck? It's not stuck, it's moving on. In fact, in large measure, it's moved on. And I would just like to ask the question, is there just a lack of political understanding or a lack of sophistication? What can be done to explain to the other NEC members of our party, my party, that it isn't simply here nationalism for unionism, that people actually want to talk about health, housing, jobs, employment, moving forward in education and so many other issues.
Okay, Chris, we'll put those questions to them then now for you, right? Okay.
First of all, we need to be careful. I don't want to misrepresent Unison. The issue isn't they've had a ballot of the members and the members have said they don't want to be involved in that argument. It's taken place regionally at organisational level. So I suspect if the membership was balloted, it might get a different result from the one that they cleave to at the moment. On the second point, and both Luke and I were nodding when you made it, to be honest with you, I think one of the reasons why we've got this problem with the NEC is that it's all too difficult to deal with. And they don't want to upset the apple cart. And there is an element, and I don't want to criticise our colleagues because, you know, they all try the best. You have to deal with an awful lot of issues on the NEC. Well, I think there is an element of it whereby they don't properly understand the situation, and the views that Luke and I have and others, so that at least they're better understood by our colleagues on the NEC.
I don't know whether I could do something.
Do you want to add anything?
No, I think George accurately summarised it. That it's like there's a bandwidth problem. There's a perception that if you engage in issues through Northern Ireland at all, it's all terribly difficult and complex and tense, and what and therefore people who are already dealing with a bunch of other terribly difficult and complex and tense political issues put this on the back burner as one to learn about, whereas I'm like, well, this is one of the world's most my day. What I'm about to say will only make sense when people understand that I have a day job that I do 2 days a week, where I'm heavily involved in the Israel-Palestine conflict. So I tend to go towards like the world's most intractable, complex situations and go, that's really fascinating. I want to dive headlong into it and learn everything I can about it and study the ins and outs and the different narratives. Whereas there's a lot of people in politics that look at those situations where there's intractable conflicts and decide that they don't want to learn the details of them. But sadly, not all of my colleagues have got quite the same mindset that I have.
Thank you, Luke. Could we just take one more contribution from Zoom and then we'll come into the room? Dougal?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a very interesting conversation that's going on, and it's great to be part of it, even though it's through Zoom. A quick couple of points. Hi, Kay. Nice to see you here. George, yes, I'm a member of Unison, and I have never been balloted.
Thank you.
So the point I want to make is about our two comrades from the NEC are talking about there's a feeling in the Labour Party establishment that they don't want to upset the apple cart, and there's a fear of being dragged into taking sides. It's very interesting that the membership of the Labour Party in Northern Ireland are people who want to upset that apple cart and who do not take sides. By not taking sides, we upset the apple cart. People join the Labour Party in Northern Ireland because they disavow sectarian politics. So we're not going to get caught now. We see through the way in which our local politicians manipulate and massage a population which is sectarianized and has suffered historical trauma. And they do it in order to generate their political salaries. The peace process is a process with no end. What it does is go through the cycle of standoff, deadlock, vacuum, threat of violence again, and that system is round and round managed by the people who have no desire whatsoever to see the Labour Party coming and saying, we're going to build a raft in this swamp for people to crawl out of the sectarian swamp, clean themselves off, and have proper sectarian politics. So we're not frightened about upsetting the apple cart. Please pass that message on. We want it upset.
Proper secular politics. So Tony?
Yeah, want to echo particularly I think what Luke said. My name's Tony Dale. I'm a Labour Party member from Manchester. I'm originally from Belfast. I've spent just finished working with USDOR for 20 years. I was in their research and policy department. Now our USDOR put in, I'm not speaking on behalf of USDOR here, but just to report on various things that have gone on. We put in a submission in support of Labour Party Northern Ireland members' right to stand. If we're talking about votes, I mean, with USDOR supporting it, with GMB supporting it, with Unite supporting it, you would have quite clearly Labour Party conference would vote in favour. But I think we've sort of spent some time trying to sort of second guess what the opposition is and how, because there won't be a straight debate. There won't be a straight argument about why it's wrong to stand candidates. And I think what Luke's pointed out is absolutely right. It's a fear. It's a real concern. And I think we need to relate to that concern and work out how do we address it and how do we persuade people that fear is unfounded. And the fear is based on two things. One, which has been said by other people, I just want to echo it. One is that by standing, we will get dragged into the bitterness of Northern Irish politics. And the irony, of course, is the person who's got dragged into it a bit is Keir Starmer with a throwaway comment that he's pro-union. Whereas in actual fact, I think one of the things we just clearer in this publication than I think in previous ones. It's very, very clear about the question the Labour Party in Northern Ireland will be neutral on the border. A lot of people from Northern Ireland in here, so there are clear views. People will have clear views about what should happen with the border. But I think what we all share is the belief that socialist politics, trade union politics, labour movement politics comes first before the border. So I think that is something that really needs to be emphasised on. The other one is, will by standing we take votes away from good people? You know, what's your definition of good people? Can be designed by SDLP, the Alliance Party, or whatever. It really depends where your constituency is. But a number of people have made the point that if you stand, if Labour Party Northern Ireland candidates stand in PR elections, there is a chance then to transfer your vote to, I wouldn't say good candidates, probably lesser bad candidates, so whatever, the lesser evil candidates further up the and that is just not understood by people in the Labour Party in England, right up to NEC level, because there's talk about standing in Westminster. In fact, I think the Westminster elections are probably the last elections that we should probably stand in. You know, let's start with council elections. Let's look at assembly elections and build up the support for Labour politics. There's also a belief that there isn't a base for Labour politics in Northern Ireland, which just ignores the history of Labour politics in Northern Ireland for over 100 years, where there's been a strong Labour tradition. So, but you know, I think we need to sort of sharpen our arguments and sharpen to deal with the concerns, which are the genuine concerns there, which is, I think, primarily, will we get dragged? Will the Labour Party be dragged into, you know, the bitterness of Northern Ireland politics? And the other one is, will we be taking votes of other candidates who are seen as lesser evil? And I think we've got good answers on both those questions.
Thank you.
It's a quick one.
You
Yes.
need
Eamon O'Tierney, Islington South, CFP. I just want to make quick. George gave us a very interesting comment about the antecedents of the SDLP and stories about Jerry. But I want to go back to this lady's comment that there is a very current problem with the SDLP. I, like Luke, am an atheist, and a number of the SDLP candidates that stood for the Assembly were very anti-choice this year, and they were never held to account for that.
Exactly. So, Boyd.
Connor, could you unmute?
That's true, and there's been very little democratic discussion within the union on this particular issue. Now, something came to light recently that might be of interest in all of this, that some of the, we will not talk about the, well, some of the people at the top, advisors in Unison, are members of People Before Profit, and People Before Profit are a Trotskyist organization, as you probably know. Now, from People Before Profit point of view, they have a monopoly on Labour politics in Northern Ireland, in that they claim to be the representative of the working class, if you like, and so they don't want competition from Labour Party politics. So that's a factor in the Unison equation. That may be a reason why there's been no ballot and no democratic debate, but that's speculation, but worth bearing in mind. Time's getting on, so I want to try and make my remarks as briefly as possible. But one of the reasons given by the NEC against a standing candidate is this notion, as Lucas mentioned, of them being an honest broker or even-handed, and that they worry that members in Northern Ireland mightn't be capable of being honest brokers in the sense that they see themselves. And I just want to say some words on this, because being an honest broker is not sufficient if the party is serious about building reconciliation in Northern Ireland, and that's what it claims it's about. But honest broking is about impartially managing the communal blocks of nationalism and unionism, and trying to broker agreement between them around whatever the contentious issue is. So it's very limited, and it ignores, as have been pointed out, it ignores the others in Northern Ireland who are the growing, who are the most interesting development of the last 20 years, perhaps, has been the growth of others of all descriptions. People not born in Northern Ireland, not born in Ireland or the UK, people of no religion, a whole variety of others, LGBT activists, and so on. This growing modern electorate, if you like, that has emerged and is ignored, if you like, in this honest broker concept. So it's a limited concept, and actually it aggravates things, because by managing communal politics, it's only feeding the flames of communal politics. It's not dissolving communal politics. It's aggravating it all. So what we need is a Labour Party with sufficient verve and vision, if you like, to take on the communal blocks electorally rather than managing them. And I think that's really the big challenge for Labour, is that it's got to be on a mission in Northern Ireland, a mission for reconciliation, which means challenging the sectarian blocks, not keeping them in being and managing them. And of course, Labour uses this honest broker concept to say that it can't run candidates in Northern Ireland because we wouldn't be good, honest brokers, and so denies us our basic democratic rights and perpetuates our communal politics. Now, the NEC quite ludicrously said in its last review that it actually said that if any of our Labour Party members in Northern Ireland got elected, they, as Labour Party representatives, would be a threat to the peace process. That's in the last NEC review. And they singled out as an example of this, that if a Labour Party member in Northern Ireland got elected as leader of a district council, the lowest level of politics, this could be a threat to the peace process. That is, and you know, you start to wonder about the people who wrote the document, you know, just where they're coming. But that is the mentality involved. And the same document argued that Labour Party elected representatives would cause conflict in the workplace in Northern Ireland. If you had a Labour councillor or a Labour shop steward, they would cause conflict in the workplace and in union branches. This is the NEC report saying this. According to Labour's NEC, and this, they actually said this, Sinn Féin and the DUP can better represent the Northern Ireland working class. Now, where are the politics in this NEC that they can come up with a document like this? I remind you that this NEC, this is the NEC of the party that Keir Hardie founded to represent trade unions in Parliament. He must be turning in his grave at the NEC's heresies, if you like, that the party isn't capable of representing the Northern Ireland working class. But also, is there not something a bit?
And this in the front, on the front, the very first page here, or on the cover, says, I do think we should have a Labour candidate that people can vote for wherever they live, and depriving them of that is not the right thing to do. Who said that? That was Keir Starmer.
Okay, now we're going to.
So I must be right then.
Sorry. Boyd's going to try and wind up, and then George's going to have.
I just 2 lines.
Okay, and then the last word we'll give to a woman. Catherine Johnson is online, wants to have a say. So okay.
Just 2 lines. There was somebody mentioned our colleague from Usdaw earlier about sharpening the arguments. And one of the things, I spent 2 years as a minister in Northern Ireland, and one of the things I kind of had to process after part of that time, by the way, as a direct rule minister, and one of the things I had to process after that was, because it felt really uncomfortable, was what was wrong with it. And what I realised is that there was a gap in accountability for me as a minister. Who was I accountable to? I mean, as an MP, I'm accountable to my CLP, and they tell me when they think I'm in the wrong, not too often, but I have an accountability there. I have a wider accountability to the Labour Party. Luke, as a member of the NEC, is accountable to the Labour Party members who vote in NEC elections and assiduously produces, after NEC meetings, a comprehensive report of what took place. And what there is an accountability gap, and we probably need to develop that argument a bit better.
Okay. So Boyd will just work on last word on it, and then Catherine Johnson from Ballymena will come in, and then we'll call the formal part over, and thank everybody for attending and supporting us on this occasion.
I want to make a slightly contentious point, but is there not something a bit racist in the predominantly English Labour Party members of the NEC saying that Labour Party members in Northern Ireland are not up to being honest brokers like them? Of whatever limited usefulness honest broking may be. The people of Northern Ireland are, under race relations legislation, a protected group, and to some extent you could feel we need protected from the NEC after some of their last statements. But Labour pretends to be above the fray as an honest broker and a neutral referee. But in reality, it is a UK governing party, and it is a major player in Northern Ireland. It sets our block grant, and it sets our tax levels, and it can take us to war if necessary, and yet we're not allowed to vote for it. I mean, this is a major democratic deficit. You couldn't say it any more than that. So you have a highly undemocratic player that seeks no electoral mandate in Northern Ireland, and yet it has wields an enormous amount of power. So obviously mediating is an important part of honest broking. Yeah, any Labour government will have to mediate in Northern Ireland between the various groups. But the point I want to make as briefly as possible is that mediating is not enough. Labour must challenge the communal blocks through the electoral process with the aim to becoming the major party of reconciliation in Northern Ireland that can appeal to all communities and bring about reconciliation. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Boyd. Now, before we bring Catherine in, I'd like to thank Brigid and Connor for helping to run the technology. If they would stand up and take a bow, if you like. Connor over there, over here. And Dougal's waving for a bow as well at the you can all take a bow for coming along and support us. But Catherine would like to come in now, I think, and we'll give you the last word, Catherine.
Okay, thanks very much, Erskine. I was very struck by the speakers throughout this meeting, particularly Andy Burnham with his introduction about commonality and so on. And I had to leave the meeting for a brief while. I came in and the guy who was sitting at the back of the room was just mentioning that the SDLP were in fact anti-choice. Well, I'd just like to point out, it's not just the SDLP who are anti-choice. The DUP are anti-choice, the Unionist Party are give a free vote, Unionist Party give a free vote at times. But the point I really wanted to make was, building on what Andy was saying, and what other people have been saying about the growth in minorities in the north of Ireland, I think we have to look at how far we are away from what Andy referred to as commonality at the moment. And if anybody wants to see the reality of that, all they have to do is look at the hames that's going on at Stormont since Sinn Féin became the largest party and the DUP are refusing to go in with them. We've got all kinds of groups clamouring for rights, people struggling with mental health issues, people on universal credit, people struggling with the high bills, trans women, LGBTQI+ community, the homeless. Stormont for years has been talking about drawing up a homeless policy. They've yet to do it, yet Northern Ireland has the highest homeless figures of anywhere in Europe. And that's nothing else but a bloody disgrace. And I think if anything shows the need for the Labour Party to allow members in Northern Ireland to organise fully, participate in the party fully, stand as candidates and put a modern socialist agenda before the people, for the people and for all the people. That time is now, and the sooner the better. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Now, for those who think that possibly the NEC has the last word in this, remember the out-of-court legal settlement that was arrived at said that the review would take place at least once in every new parliament.
Yeah.
It's not over and done with just because you have one late review and then you say, right, that'll do for another 4 years. If we are rejected on the strength of the comprehensive arguments we put forward, which are statistical, they're based on polls, they're based on legal precedent, whatever, then we'll be back again. We're not giving up on them. They're not getting away with it. And those people who claim to represent a union without actually consulting a union, they're not getting away with it either. So on that basis, finishing on a fighting tone, no matter what happens, we'll be back. Thanks very much.